Thanks, Maria. Thanks for that introduction. Hi, everyone. Thanks and welcome to the last session for the summit. I hope all had a good time in the summit. There were a lot of great announcements from Apollo, the connectors, the entity caching, the Apollo language server, and a lot of good learnings from the other sessions, and a lot of great interactions with everybody. Well, about me, I'm Manoj Sukumaran. I'm a principal architect at T-Mobile. I work in the API space. I work defining API designs, API access management and security, and also building developer experiences in T-Mobile. Well, as Maria said, this is my second talk. Last year, I had an opportunity to talk in the summit. The topic was around policy-based authorization and authentication. And this year, I come up with a completely new topic. It is about how to unlock the revenue streams, how to build an API monetization model around your GraphQL APIs. So let's get started. Today, I'd like to cover a few things. Taking a step back, cover from the basic, like seeing what API monetization means for an organization. What are the different components of API monetization? What are the different monetization models that are available? And when it comes to GraphQL, what is the challenges when we deal with GraphQL API and when we try to monetize that GraphQL API? And we'll also touch upon few monetization options. This is not the complete set, but some options that are available when you want to monetize your GraphQL API. So, to start with, let's talk about APIs. Let's see what a valuable API is. The definition of valuable API differs from a person to person. If you ask a developer what a valuable API is, a developer might say is a valuable API is something they code once, they commit and deploy, and they do no longer need to troubleshoot it anymore. So it might be a different version of a valuable API. If you ask what a valuable API to a product owner or a business owner, for them, a valuable API is something that enables a business function and helps them to deliver a business value. If you go up in the chain and ask somebody, a sponsor, about what a valuable API is, for a sponsor, a valuable API might be something that provides them a return on investment, right? So the definition of valuable API differs from person to person, but at the core, API is the central nervous system of your digital landscape. They talk to multiple systems, they transfer data between multiple systems, and help you realize the business value and business functions, right? So before we go deeper into the topic, a quick show of hands. How many of you have exposed APIs in public and have monetized those APIs? Awesome. How many of you have done for GraphQL APIs? Awesome, right? So for others, thanks for that. So for others, we'll talk deeper what API monetization is, and then we'll go further on seeing how we monetize GraphQL APIs. So what is API monetization? API monetization is like generating revenues from API. That's a plain, simple term, right? So you have APIs. You want your APIs to perform a certain business function, but it doesn't end there. You're not limiting your focus only to deliver your business functions, but you take those APIs, you build a product or use case around it, a business use case around it, expose it to publicly to other third-party developers and business units so that they can use those APIs, and through the usage, you can generate revenue as an additional revenue for your organization. So that is the API monetization core. So by doing this, you foster innovation, enhance the customer experience, and you also expand your market from your traditional channels to new markets and new use cases by exposing your APIs to third-party developers. They come up with some innovative ideas. they can start using your APIs, you provide your data set securely, and by that process, you can start generating the revenue. So what are the different monetization models that are available? So I mentioned few monetization models here. The first one is the freemium model. Like you build your APIs, you open up a freemium model where you want the third-party developers to try your APIs, and you want them to get more encouraged with those APIs and increase the usage of the APIs. In such scenarios, you can have a freemium model. And once the developers start using and they're comfortable with this model, they can start subscribing or upgrading to more tiered pricing models. The second option is usage-based. So this is more like you have a solid use case, like for example, a payment processing API is there, which is needed by a third-party application. So they subscribe to your product and they want to use it. So they use it and you charge them based on the number of API calls that is made or the data set they are trying to access. So that is more of an API usage-based API model. And the third model is more of a subscription model where you let the users or the consumers subscribe to your product and you charge them kind of a recurring fee and then let them use your APIs. This is pretty common with some SaaS providers. So that is the subscription models. For some consumers who are very worried about the cost or overages, there is the other model where you have a prepaid model where you provide them, you set them up a wallet of the API usage or a dollar amount, and the users cannot exceed that. If they exceed, either they have to upgrade or they have to, you don't honor that request. So these are some of the monetization models that are available. So next, what we can see is like, what are the different components that forms the base of the API monetization? So as I said previously, you know the data sets that is provided in your organization. The key is to build a strong use case or a business model and productize that particular API. Once you productize that API, then you need to provide a user experience, which is primarily, for example, a developer portal, which can cater to both the internal users and also the external-facing consumers. For an internal user, it may be a product owner who has come up with a new product and they want to make it available for external users. So for internal users, they can go into the developer portal, publish their API documentation, the security requirements around the APIs, some samples, and error handling, and also some pricing related to the API. So that is for the internal users. When you talk about the external consumers, we need to make this developer portal in such a way that it is easy for external consumers to learn about your product, read the documentation, subscribe to the product, and manage the API subscription through the portal. The second key aspect is the product, the pricing catalog, which will basically the catalog of all the products, and the pricing should be available. It should be available in the developer portal for view, but internally you have that pricing model and the catalog set up so that it can be customizable, configurable based on the consumer and the use cases. And the last one, the core piece, is the rating and charging engine. So based on like the API models that we saw, monetization models that we saw on the previous slide, the rating and charging applies in real time, the rates and charges, and that turns into an invoice, and the consumers are billed based on that. So these are some of the monetization components. So this API monetization is not new. It is there for a long time. There are a lot of API gateways that already enables this API monetization. There are several API gateways that provide such an option. Let's look at an example of where you want to expose API. Let's take an example for a REST API. Assume that you have a resource and you want to expose that resource through the API gateway, and also want to monetize that. So for that resource, you end up coming up with a Swagger with the resource attributes and expose it through using an endpoint. And the API gateways can easily track the number of calls happening to that endpoint. Thereby, you can start building the rating and charging model. Now, if a consumer wants only one or two attributes out of that resource, there is no option currently available in REST where you can only bill for one or two attributes, because the gateways currently do not parse the requests and responses. So it is very difficult to build a flexible rating and charging model. You cannot prevent or you cannot avoid overfetching using this REST API approach. So option would be, or a better option would be, to provide GraphQL, where you can give the complete menu of the items that you have as GraphQL. Or you can share the schema with the consumers. They can look at the complete menu of options, the operations that they can perform, and they can be charged only for the attributes that is requested for, and only those attributes are charged and rated and charged, and that is sent to the consumer. This way, it's more flexible to the users, and it is also easier to manage. Maybe not easier to manage. Let's see what options are there for GraphQL monetization. So in GraphQL, there are some challenges. First one is, like in REST we saw, it's resource-based. You have individual endpoints, and API gateways can easily track those endpoints. But for a GraphQL, assume that you build a public contract, you're exposing that in the public. You have n number of operations, and each operations have n plus 1 number of, or n star number of fields in it. Now, how do we monetize the entry point? So you cannot monetize the number of API hits that is happening on the entry point, right? So you need to have some other mechanism where you can go and trace all the way up to the operation that is being invoked and the fields that are requested and responded to, right? So that is one challenge that we have. The next one would be the pricing customization. What if you want to provide, since it's a single contract that you're exposing to multiple consumers, if you want to customize a pricing for a consumer A and a different pricing for consumer B, how do you build out that pricing customization? And the third one is schema management. How do we manage schema changes such that it doesn't break the existing contracts, and it is more compatible with the existing consumers of the API? And lastly, it is like, how do we rate and charge partial responses or errors in the GraphQL API? So we will discuss few of the options. Again, as I said, this is not a complete extensive list of options. These are some of the options that we have. If there are any other options, please do let me know also. First one, I think query cost. Yesterday in the keynote address, there was a mention about the query cost for demand control, right? Where the router is starting to is logging the request estimate, and also in the response actuals are also being logged. So query cost would be an option that would help in extending the cost, not only for demand control, but also use it for monetization purpose. So as I'm showing here, you can have the cost directive, and for each of the embedded, each of the fields, you can have a cost directive. This cost directive can be purely for the demand control purposes, but you can use that and extend it for monetizing your APIs. So if a client calls and requests only 2 fields, you exactly know what's the cost involved, and you can transform or translate it to a monetizable value. There's one drawback with this is, like, how do we customize it for certain clients, right? So, and it is embedded within the schema as a directive. So every time you change the values, you need to rebuild it, you need to compose the schema again and then publish it again. What about the backward compatibility options? So there are a few pros and cons with this. If you have a static pricing model, you want to apply uniform pricing across all the consumers, across and kind of use it as a standard pattern. This is a good option to consider to monetize your API. What other options are available? So the next option would be more of externalizing this pricing and rating and charging through an externalized kind of a policy engine. Here, if you see here, the requests are made to the supergraph. The request flows to the subgraphs realize those, resolves those functions, and in the response flow of the lifecycle, the coprocessor you can send it to a coprocessor and send it to a policy engine, or it is external to that infrastructure. And in the policy engine, you can evaluate the response that is being sent, attach it to the policies, or if you're using any other open policy agent kind of thing, you can have some custom policies by client, and either log it in the monetization as a third party, as a separate call, or you attach it to the response header and use it in the upstream flow somewhere else. So this model provides a more externalized, customizable solution. But one thing here is like we are tapping into the response flow of the life cycle. So we need to be really careful in terms of not breaking the response flow, causing any delays. It needs to be handled in a more asynchronous way. This would work really well if your organization is completely into GraphQL, but what if you have a mix of Graph and REST APIs that are exposed and you want to monetize both Graph and REST APIs? And you also want to apply some level of customization for REST APIs. So we can extend this model and move it one step up. Like the next model that I'm showing here is where you are moving this monetization, externalized monetization upfront into an API gateway. So API, I said already, some API gateways already provide the option to monetize, but they don't parse the request response objects or the elements. Here you have a process where once a request is honored, a request and the response is honored, you can have a synchronous mechanism. Many API gateways provide that to trigger asynchronous jobs. So you can you can log those request, response, and the metadata to a transaction recorder. This transaction recorder would be primarily sending this information to a rating and charging engine. The rating and charging engine primarily consists of the rate configurator, the catalog that I initially mentioned, and the policies that can be used to customize the rating and charging by consumer. So using this, you can apply customized rates. You don't tamper with the request response flows. You can extend it for Graph, REST, and any other mechanisms. And you can have your own dedicated monetization recorder. Since there is monetization, you need to be having some compliance and reporting and analytics. You can use it and extend it and apply this level of compliance for that in the monetization database. So this also provides an option to do the field level monetization. Like the previous option, you can define pricing all the way up to the fields as a policy and use that rate configurator and the policies to apply the field level monetization. So so that is the option. There may be more options available. Pretty much that's all I had. So a quick recap of what we discussed so far. So as I said, API monetization all depends on the use case or the product use case. We need to be really sure of the data set that we have, how we can productize this API or the data set, build a productized API around it, and have a solid use case. So that is the core or the primary aspect of the monetization. The second piece is like once you have that monetization product, how do you sell it? How do you market and sell it, right? How do you make that developer friendly so that others can consume those APIs, understand about the APIs? That's where the developer portal comes in. We talked about that. And then we need to have the different pricing models applicable because it may not be a single pricing model applicable for all the consumers. And we also talked about the GraphQL API methods, the challenges that we have, and some of the patterns. We talked about the query cost directives, the policy-based authorization using coprocessor, policy-based pricing using the coprocessor, and also asynchronous field level monetization at the API gateway level. These are some of the items that I wanted to discuss today. Thanks for joining, and good, thank you. Oh, last one more piece, right? So as I said, APIs are just not for internal purposes. Once you start building the use cases, it will fuel innovation, it can unlock new revenue streams, and also enhance customer engagement. Thank you.